Welcome to the Hunting Beast Podcast, your source for hunting tactics, news, and stories. And now your host, Mario Traficante.
All right, well, let's get started. So welcome to this week's podcast. This week we're talking to Luke Muldoon, also known as moondoondude on the Hunting Beast forum. Luke recently posted a pretty popular thread on the forum, 37 mature bucks, and it really tells the story about how he approaches his hunting. He has a big interest in the deer population in general, the health of the deer herd, and he really uses that knowledge of his environment as well as the deer herd in general to use in his approach for going after big bucks year after year. He's got some unique situations in Maryland where he's from, with these deer populations being pushed out by a lot of land development. So there's some heavy pressure not only from other hunters, but just in the deer populations themselves for foraging for food and getting access to good land to roam. So with that, we can hop right in and hear from Luke and hear how he got started with all this craziness.
Cool. So, yeah, I mean, you give me a pretty good rundown there because of a little chat yesterday, but
yeah.
So I started all this craziness out probably in the 90s. I'm born in '88. I'm only 27. So back then, the central hub of probably the area that ended up populating most of the immediate area within probably 10 or 15 miles was this big wildlife refuge, where I grew up about 10 miles outside of Washington, D.C.
Uh-huh.
And I used to drive through there with my dad during summer evenings. And there's actually an agricultural research center about 15 or so minutes, maybe 10 miles from where we grew up.
Sure.
And they planted all that stuff in beans. I started off in the summers just driving around and checking these fields with my dad in the summers, and we would see some giants back before they let the public go in there and hunt it. And that was really the only place that you saw a deer. And back then, it was in most suburban and urban environments back then, at least where I grew up, in the a little bit southeast of Washington, D.C., in that metropolitan area, there weren't a lot of deer. So I grew up and I had a big hill in my backyard, and on the opposite side of the hill was an ag field with rotating beans and corn. And during the years that it was beans, I used to run back there. My dad worked for the government, so he had these big pair of Steiner binoculars. They were
Sure,
as big as me. They wouldn't even fit in my backpack. I remember I had to bungee cord them into my backpack whenever I rode my bike around with them in the backpack. And so I used to go back there whenever they had beans. And starting in probably the early 2000s, probably 2001 to 2003 time frame, I started seeing deer back there behind my place, where I grew up in the neighborhood. And the farmer, we had a good relationship with him. He let my dad actually farm out the top corner, very, very small little family garden that we had there in the top corner of his lot. We had a good relationship. And, I had a couple places like that growing up. And I used to just ride my bike. I could throw my bow in my backpack, or whatever else, and I just used to ride my bike here and there and check on these spots and hunt these spots. But
so you think observing, as a kid, obviously when you were younger,
that's what ignited everything, I would say.
Being able to observe a lot of these deer in their natural environment sort of started that burn inside you? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, without a doubt. That was, I remember my mom even driving me to school. We had to drive through, this is early 90s. We had to drive through that wildlife refuge. It was a road that cut through all of it. And I had to go to the northwest corner of the county, and because that's where she was a school teacher. So she would bring me to her school, with her, and she would just throw me in kindergarten. I went to kindergarten from the time I was like 3 or 5.
Sure.
And she would just say, "Hey, Luke, how many deer did you see?" And I would be like, 12, and she'd be like, "I saw 13." I'd be like, "Oh, no, I saw 14." So I was obsessed from a young age. And, to this day, my mom and dad call it passion there. People are like, "Man, you're obsessed." And they're like, "No, he's just very passionate." So,
Right.
And my wife included. You know how that works. So I ended up watching those deer back behind my place one year. They put in beans. And there was a bachelor group. Whenever they put beans out there, there'd be a good bachelor group of like 3 to 5 deer. And, just like anywhere else, the average mature buck would probably be, 135 to 140 inches. And that year, this would have been summer of '03. I ended up watching a group of like 3 or 5 out there. And I built a wooden stand back there right where they were coming out. And there was like a big boxwood thicket. And boxwood's like a typical, used in a lot of landscapes. And around here, it's old plantation farm country, like old tobacco road. Everything here used to be tobacco plantations. And so what happened is...
So that boxwood is real kind of thick and gnarly.
Oh, yeah. It's real thick, gnarly. It's real thick stuff, and it grows up real thick, and it gets tall. I mean, typically it's just a little bush in front of your house. But, these are probably hundreds of years old. And, they grew, and they spread out. And this thicket kind of had honeysuckle and grapevine that kind of overtook it, too. And there weren't a lot of deer back then, so everything could really get a chance to grow up thick, and the deer couldn't browse it down. So there was this thicket back there, and everything around here, I should mention, is kind of based around a water system. So the entire state of Maryland is, the whole western border of the state is Potomac River, and then the Chesapeake Bay kind of cuts that state in half, and everything on the east side of the Chesapeake, in between the Chesapeake Bay and the Atlantic, is what we call the eastern shore, and everything between the Chesapeake and the Potomac is what we call the western shore. And that pretty much encompasses most of the state, at least part of the part of the state that I hunted. And so I hunted the western shore. Southern Maryland is St. Mary's, Charles, and Prince George's counties where I hunt in Maryland. And that's part of the western shore. So regardless, most of the state is water. So all these systems, as I continue to talk, just keep in mind that they're centralized off of some type of water system, and it's usually a branch or a creek off one of these main rivers that run all through the state.
Got it.
And so these deer back behind my house were working out of this boxwood and honeysuckle and grapevine thicket and coming through a small patch of hardwoods before they hit this bean field. And I put this stand, it was literally right on the edge of this field on a southern red oak tree, man. I can still remember this. I could go back there, and tell you where it was, but now it's all houses, but I could walk down that fence line where, it's still the property line to this day of where I put this stand. And I remember waiting for opening day, and it always used to be September 15th up until 3 or 4 years ago. Now it fluctuates between the 5th and the 8th.
Right,
and, I remember being like, all right, the 15th, My dad already gave me the go-ahead to take off school that day, or get out of school early that day and skip football practice so I could get out there and hunt. And a hurricane blew through, man, and just torched everything from like the 13th to the 16th. I forget the name of the hurricane, but it was a big one. We're 50 miles as the crow flies where I grew up from the Atlantic Ocean, and then not even 10 from the Chesapeake Bay. So we get hit during September or August, and even sometimes in October. We always get hit with some type of tropical storm or hurricane every year, and that was when that one hit. So it was like the 16th. It was like the 16th or 17th, and I went out the first day I could. The woods were all a wreck, and I got up in a tree, and the deer came by, the biggest one. The whole battery group came by. They were all right out of velvet, and I shot that deer with a bare whitetail hunter, man. I used that bow for like 5 years, from the time I was probably 13 to the time I think I was 17 or 18. I shot a bare whitetail hunter. It was my dad's bow.
So with that batcher group, did you have to watch the other ones come out before your target buck came?
No, he was in the front, which isn't typical. I think last night when we talked, actually, we'll mention it later on, is I usually get the littler or the younger bucks, the 1 and 2 year olds usually end up getting those big ones killed.
Right.
Because they'll clear the path for the big ones, and the big ones will follow suit to the 1 and 2 year olds, and they'll just walk right into a death trap. So, no, he came out first. He was with a group of, I remember there was a big 7-point with him, a lopsided 3x4, and another nice 8 with him. And that one was a 9 with 2 big dagger kickers off of his front left brow. He ended up being 11. And he probably went like 135, but at that time, I mean, my dad has been hunting here his whole life. Just like 90% of people in Maryland, his biggest buck is, probably 105 inches deer or so.
Sure.
And I remember, being 5 or 6 years old and him shooting that deer and him pulling me out of school early to come look at it. And, that was huge. And I remember thinking, like, everybody told me when I shot that deer, like, this is going to be the biggest deer you ever shoot in your life. Like, never forget this, never forget this.
Right.
And then that really got me kicked up, man. I shot that deer with a broken right arm that I broke during football season. I don't know, it's my draw hand and that left hand used to stabilize and push, and that's where most of your weight is and most of your pressure. So
right.
I remember my dad had to drag that deer out, so that was pretty sweet too.
That was good. He'll never forget
it's
that.
good for me, not good for him. So that kind of kicked it off for sure. That's what really got me. Not that I wasn't already going for it, but over the course of the next couple of years, I ended up shooting some good deer. I ended up shooting 2 years after that. I shot 2 really nice deer. One I got on November 19th, and I remember I got the other one on December 26th. You'll see through the course of this conversation I use dates a lot. I just remember the dates I shoot deer. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think
because
we all do to an extent.
And a couple of recent ones you shot are later in the season as well.
Yeah, I do well in late season. We'll discuss that later on as to why. I credit most of that to my walking, constantly walking, constantly shed hunting. So yeah, I ended up hunting around there where I grew up. I shot some really nice deer, man. But more so than that, not only did I shoot some good deer, I think back then the pressure was definitely less. There was a lot less people hunting. The equipment and technology that we use today was not available, particularly trail cameras, which is you and I, as well as just about everybody else knows. And that and the overpopulation the media use of the hunting and what hunting is now. Trail cameras really changed the game, and I think that was part of that, what you originally hinted at with that 37 mature buck thread that I started was just kind of a rant. It was like, this is what cameras are doing to hunting, and, meanwhile I'm the one saying it, and I'm the one that's probably the most guilty of it too,
Yeah.
So, and I shot a couple good deer throughout the years, and I kind of kept that going up until today. The first one I shot, and I just kept kind of picking them off, and as I kept going, I started to really focus in a lot more on one specific deer throughout the years, and I think that's what really changed me as a hunter, because I had to learn so much more about deer in general and then about a specific deer once I started targeting one deer. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I had to know a lot about deer in general, but I had to know even more about that specific deer, his habits, his routines, his specific personality, and what he liked and what he didn't like, and how much pressure he could tolerate, amongst other things.
Yeah, so you mentioned that yesterday when we were talking too, was that how the environment of the area that you were hunting in has changed, and a lot of it was due to land development that was being done around you that displaced, or what you called fragmented, a lot of these sanctuaries that these deer were staying in, and that caused these herds to move in certain positions. So why don't you talk about that a lot, because you seem to focus a lot on the deer behavior side of things.
I said, all right, because I didn't think you wanted to get me started on that yet, but I'll get ranting on that too.
Oh, that's fine.
What happened was this boom happened, the development boom around here. I myself, like I said, same thing with trail cameras. I'm guilty of using trail cameras to my advantage. Like, killed the past couple deer that I've shot, past 2 big deer I shot. A large part of that was because of trail cameras, but that boom I mean, I hunt with a developer. I get my land from a developer. So it's good and bad. That's how I get my resources, my hunting resources, and my land and my access. But at the same time, it's the only reason this guy's getting this land is because it has a dollar bill sign attached to it, and eventually it's going to become dirt, and it's going to become houses, shopping malls, or whatever else have you.
Right.
So, a lot of what I was doing back then even was I was hunting on these ag pieces, and all these farmers that I knew growing up, I hunted on a huge, what used to be an old plantation house growing up too. It was right down the street. And it was, I'm not going to say it on here because I don't want people to know where I'm hunting, but it was a big, it's well-known big place, and it's a pretty prominent family around here. And my family actually used to work in the horse stables back then.
Okay.
For these guys. So, and that's how I got the connection. My dad used to hunt there, and I ended up hunting it up until the point that it's now just nothing but a huge community. So what happened with all this fragmentation, like is it just condensed a deer, and it condensed a deer, and it condensed a deer. So once the deer kept moving and became sandwiched in these small little lots, they obviously just started crushing the habitat, and they decimated almost all of their available resources over the course of a couple of years. That doesn't happen in 1 year.
Right.
The problem is it happens in 2 or 3, 4 or 5 years, and it takes 5-fold, 10-fold of that to come back.
Right.
So once the deer eliminate their resources, they just can't come back. And the biggest issue I had with that, like we talked about yesterday, is, to this day, I walk these places, I find some really, really powerful and impressive sheds and some really impressive deer in places with crap habitat, crap resources, and it's all because they have age. But the biggest determinant I found, there's no supportive data about this, just my personal experiences and talking to a couple other guys that I talk to a lot, we'll get into later, about the crowd I associate myself typically with in all things deer are a bunch of wildlife biologists. They're deer biologists for the counties around here. So my biggest thing is if you change or manipulate a deer's core range or habitat, development, construction, clearing of the land, whatever else, not like hinge cutting, not doing a clear cut, that type stuff, that can even be considered habitat improvement. I'm talking turning these places to dirt, flipping them into houses and shopping malls. When you do that to a deer in his habitat, that induces a lot of stress on a deer, more so than any stress that hunting pressure or predators can put on them, in my personal opinion. And that's where, those are the areas where, when I started that 37 mature bucks thread, that I was hinting at and alluding to the stunting that I'm seeing, and the issues that I'm having with antler growth and even body mass and like BMI for deer. I'm having huge issues with that because of that change in their core ranges being manipulated and the fragmentation of their core ranges and habitat that they're consistently utilizing the resources out of for their growth and for their maturity. So
and that makes sense. I mean, if you think about it, for the size of the deer herd, there's going to be an optimal home range,
carrying capacity.
Carrying capacity of the environment that they live in. There's going to be plenty of food, plenty of water, just enough deer, to have the population, the breeding capacity to be in check. But once that starts to teeter, then it's going to start affecting them, in reproduction, as well as just, like you said, stress. I mean, they're not growing in a healthy environment. Stress is going to affect their antler growth. Stress is going to affect their offspring. And it also may affect the introduction of certain diseases if the herd gets stressed as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we have around here is what I see a lot of, it seems contradictory to itself, but this is what I'm personally experiencing. Areas with crazy high deer densities that have a lot of issues with, obviously these crazy high deer density places, for whatever reason, it seems like they have very skewed buck-to-doe ratios. Mm-hmm. It seems that their buck-to-doe ratio is like 1 to 5. That's practically impossible when you really look at it because of the facts of how much of the population a button buck and the 1.5-year-olds make up. But these deer, regardless, the buck-to-doe ratio is extremely skewed. And what's happening is these deer are keeping their antlers until like March and April, like late March and April every year in places that typically you would think, oh, stressed out environment, overabundance of deer, lack of resources, they're going to drop early. It's not happening because what's happening is these does keep cycling and cycling and cycling. And you're getting a lot of does that are giving birth in August and September, which is creating a worse off herd than even before because the does can't. That's not natural,
Right, and then so they're going to, depending on how the seasons run, as far as the temperancy of the weather, those fawns are going to be put under undue stress when they're not as physically mature as a fawn that's birthed earlier.
And, they've done a lot of studies which prove that first year and a half for any deer is critical to its growth. I mean, it's just like anybody else in any other species. I mean, that's when you're building blocks of life happen in those first year and a half for deer. It's when they're forming their skeletal structure and they're really growing into themselves. So, I mean, there's a lot of negative things that happen from that, and then obviously one of the most obvious things that I see in that's where I see some antler stunning, because deer are some of my healthier spots, just like anywhere probably across the country. I'm seeing some considerable antler growth by March even. My biggest bucks, mid-March, they're all dropped, and mostly around here, even my healthy spots, my big ones drop in February. But it seems like as soon as they drop, those bases from next year start coming in. And as soon as those antlers start growing, it's typically when that green up happens, when the deer are looking for that balance between potassium and in their diet. And that's why they crave soft, is because something has to do with the potassium levels that they get from that green leafy substances during spring. When they start growing, they crave that sodium, that NaCl, sodium and calcium, to balance their potassium levels that they're getting from that intake of green leafy stuff. So, it's screwing with their antler growth. It's screwing with a lot of things, and it's basically just really, really negative for the deer herd to get that out of control and that imbalance. But it happens. I mean, it's happening all over the country, I'm sure, in a lot of metropolitan areas.
Yeah, I mean, it's happening.
Fringe and fragmented areas.
Yep. I think it's happening here in Wisconsin, and a lot of the areas that are surrounding, like Madison and Milwaukee, or any of the larger metropolitan areas, there's urban sprawl. And with urban sprawl, a lot of the farms are getting bought up, and they're being turned into subdivisions. And then hunting access is being restricted in those areas, and the deer population is being displaced. A couple of my buddies, they have access to hunting land right here in Sussex that's through a builder. Same situation, eventually a little shopping center is going to be built there, or a subdivision is going to be built there. So it's kind of like the clock's ticking on those deer and that habitat that they're living in.
So I'll talk about what happens around here in this habitat. Like I'll say a couple times through the course of the conversation, not everything I say obviously is going to translate well to you guys or to everybody, because everybody's in a different situation. Some of these guys that are listening to this are probably out in the middle of nowhere where they don't even have paved roads, But here, everything blends between Washington, D.C., Annapolis, and Baltimore, and a lot of these metropolitan areas of Maryland. And where I hunt is south of all that. So I'm outside of that blend, but a lot of these places that I shed hunt and that I grew up hunting, like I grew up like 10 miles outside of D.C. Okay. And I still have access to some ground there, and I could even hunt there, but those are the areas that you really started to see probably around 5 years ago, the impacts of the fragmentation and the overabundance of deer, and deer densities just being way, way off. So I can tell you, growing up, like 5 to 10 years ago was the glory days of these metropolitan areas in Maryland. I mean, I can tell you for several years in a row, I saw a 200-inch deer. And I don't know where else you could say that. I mean, you can't hardly say that anywhere in the country. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, I mean, I know a 200-inch deer, man. I was seeing 200-inch deer. I wish I had a trail camera. I wish I had the resources that I have available now and go back in time and use them. I'm sure I would be blown off my feet. And it was just because these deer were their populations were growing quickly, but the habitats, think of it as a bar, right? 2 bars in a bar graph. The one bar is the habitat, and the other bar is that deer density and the resources that the deer utilize from that habitat. As long as that habitat bar is growing faster and or equal to that deer density bar, and the amount of resources that the deer are utilizing from the habitat, you're all right. But as soon as that thing flips and the deer bar grows faster than the habitat bar, that's when things start going downhill. So that's not to say that 200-inch deer aren't still out there. I'm sure there's certain areas in the state of Maryland and metropolitan areas where they still exist, but there were areas, it was fragmented woodlots even growing up. However, it was an unchanged environment. There wasn't a lot of development going on for a couple of years,
right.
And there were small agricultural pockets in between here and there. And it seemed like deer moved less, you know what I mean? Because they didn't have to go as far to get all the resources that they needed to live in a certain spot. So growing up, man, I saw, it was probably like 2005 to 2010, even 2011, 2012. Like 2011, I saw that deer. I ended up shooting 2012 that went right at 200, right under it. And like 2010, I shot at 185, 190-inch double drop. And that was the biggest deer I saw for, in that year. And the year prior was that deer. And then 2011 and 2012, the biggest deer I saw anywhere for those 2 years was the deer I shot. But leading up to that, man, it was like every year, it was like they would just pop up. You know what I mean? I saw some huge high 170s, 180s typicals and the times too. And they weren't in places that, where everything was perfect. It was just that the deer had enough resources and the genetics around here and the nutrition around here was okay. I think the soil quality here is great. I mean, we're pretty much in a big peninsula delta down here where everything is dragging down all these river systems,
right?
And in some way or another, and and the agricultural access is huge, especially if they follow it up with some type of cover crop. And you can't really practice QDM unless you have food available for deer year-round.
Right.
So these places were practicing QDM by default, and they wouldn't even have to go out and harvest all these does because the deer densities weren't out of control then. And what happened?
So you had the perfect combination. You had the perfect combination of nutrients in the soil with the amount of food that was available, and the deer population was in proper check. Yep. I mean, some might argue here in Wisconsin, and I'm sure some guys on the forum will have comments, but a lot of the open land here, maybe it probably doesn't have the ideal ratio of food and nutrients to the amount of deer that are out there to be able to grow, deer like that.
Yep. So, and then, every deer is different, man. So some of these deer, like I would see once and they'd be gone. Other of those deer I knew live there, trail camera, that's what I'm saying, man, if I had a trail camera, because you know how it is. I have deer, one property in particular, I have 2 deer that are over 10 years old. I had these deer on camera, the first trail camera I ever bought.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, they're still in that 37 mature box set, both of those bucks are. I mean, it was literally like, they were mature. They were bigger then when I first bought that first trail camera in probably 08 or something like that, 09. Oh, it was 08. I had those deer on that trail camera, the first trail camera I bought. And I still have them to this day, and they were bigger then than they are now. So,
yep.
I mean, man, like, and those deer are still alive, and there's plenty of people hunting around here, man, believe me. We talked about it last night. I think Maryland's third in the amount of yearling bucks, 1.5-year-old bucks harvested, right behind Michigan and Pennsylvania. And then it's number 1 in the country for the state that kills the most bucks per square mile.
Sure.
So, and like I told you before, a lot of Maryland is covered up in, a large majority of Maryland is urban sprawl in the metropolitan area. So it just shows you how many people are packed into these agricultural areas where you can actually get out and hunt. Not to say that the metropolitan areas aren't overrun with stands and bay piles and whatever else, because they are. But
so how did you? So if we go back to you with that first kill that you made when you were 14 on that bean field. When you were observing those bucks, so how many times a week did you watch them? Did you watch them every day? Or did you
I was probably just about every day, yeah. I mean, for a couple of the deer that I shot, so that was probably just about every day just because of access was so easy. If not every day, then it was probably 4 times a week,
Did you know at the time when you were watching them where exactly they were bedding and coming from, or?
Yeah, that was just from experience and living there. I knew that, hey, this is where deer lay down back here, and hey, this is where they were coming out of the same spot every night. So what happened was, from my backyard, leading all the way down to where these deer were coming out, it was a gradual slope down for about 200 yards or so, and then it started sloping back up. So right where it started sloping back up, that ravine there had a little creek in it and a little swampy bottom back there.
All right.
And they would always come up on that top side of that opposite side of the bottom, right on the other side of that swampy. It actually, when it rained enough, it would fill up with water. And they would always come up they would never come up on the bottom side, and it would always be the top side. So knowing what I know now, I didn't know back then. I know I didn't, about wind and that and this and whatever. I knew about it, but I didn't know how important it was. I was 14. My dad wasn't one to teach me. Like, I tell you, he comes hunting with me. He's like one of those opening day guys. Hey, where are we going tomorrow? He's like, put me somewhere I can shoot all day, And he wasn't one to be like, oh, yeah, your wind needs to be blowing out of the southwest because the deer are coming from here. Like, he wasn't that type of dude. So I knew where the deer were coming out. What's that?
So thinking back now, those deer were coming, you said, on the top side of that draw, where that creek bottom was. Why do you think now they were entering the field in that place?
That was I always find deer like to enter, particularly bachelor groups, enter the field somewhere near the lowest point. I think a lot of that could have to do with the thermals and the way. Have you ever seen fog sit down? You ever seen how the fog sits down in those bottom little corners? It's probably something to do with the thermals. Oh, yeah. So it's probably something to do with the thermals and the way that the air moves, and it also could be that's being silhouetted. Maybe after years of evolution, the deer that have survived are those that prefer to come out where they're not silhouetted up against the hillside for however many predators that used to be around in North America to come out and kill them.
Right.
So I think that that was the lowest spot that they could come out to without walking through chest high, would have been for me. For you and I, knee-high water, you know what I mean? And deer will do that. You and I both know deer will come out in knee-high water, but if they don't have to, they won't. You know what I mean? If they don't have to every night and they can just walk right around it and they feel safe doing that, then they're going to do that.
Yeah, they're still going to take the path of least resistance, Yeah,
and looking back on it, it was perfect because where they were bedding was due east of where the bean field was. So, I mean, the prevailing wind, I don't know about out there, but the prevailing wind here is west and northwest. It just is. Especially for your best days for barometric pressure, and you get your best movement off west-northwest days. So that's when I like to hunt. Most of my stands are based off of west and northwest winds, if at all possible, and my stand selections are based off of that. So that's what they were doing that day. I can tell you, watching deer back there, living there, and seeing it day after day after day, it just became so, it was easy. That was an easy one. Killed a lot of deer, and that was probably the easiest one. What's that?
So you were able to set up on the bottom of the draw then and get them as they stepped into the field?
Yeah, I got him literally like as he stepped out. Like he probably took one step out. I can remember to this day. He took one step out. He looked up towards there was a big transformer box up there on the top of the hill behind my house. Yeah. He looked right up there where I used to watch him with these Steiners. And they used to look up, they'd see me, and I'd be like, oh, humans, it's in a backyard. And he took a step out, he looked up that hill, and as soon as he looked up, I drilled. So, I mean, I could tell you like that for every deer I've ever shot, man. Every big one I've ever shot, I can tell you walk step by step. And then he was with that big loppy-sided 7 and a nice 8, and they just took off, and he went running straight up the hill, up the edge of the bean hedgerow and died like maybe 150 yards from my house. And I shot him like 250 yards at the most from my house. So that was pretty cool.
So how did you, from that point on, I mean, you started really focusing on getting feet on the ground, and obviously you really enjoy getting out and picking up sheds. How did you start focusing on that aspect of it to learn more about the habitat and how these deer are using the habitat?
So everything started there, you know what I mean, in my house where I grew up. I remember being pretty amazed at I can't believe that deer are just showing up. Like, why are they just showing up out of nowhere? You know, right. I was like, there never were deer here. I've lived here my whole life, and now they're here. You know, it seemed like overnight. I remember, like, the first time seeing them out in this bean field with my dad behind my house, being like, this is awesome, man. Like, look, there's bucks. Not only are there deer out here, there's some pretty impressive bucks, and they're out here eating these beans. And I just started walking behind my house, and I remember being, my dad took me out a couple times to shed hunt, and I remember being like, you know, I'm a workout junkie. I think I always have been in a way or another. Uh-huh. I remember being like, this is awesome. It's like, I don't even have to shoot a buck, and I get to pick up his antlers, you know? So, and to this day, I mean, you know, like right before me and you started talking today, I told you I went out this afternoon shed hunting. I'll go out. I get off work. I get into work at like 6 or so. I work till probably sometime between 4 and 4:30, and then I'll run out for an hour every day. Mm-hmm. And either a quick burn fields real quick, I'll do a quick burn, or I'll go somewhere I know they're down. Like this time of the year, I can typically find a place that I know at least one good one's down, or I know that some deer are down, or most of them are down, and I can go check some better habitat, some more security cover, and some stuff like that this time of year. But I can tell you, man, I think, like I told you last night, I learn more. I can hunt a place all year. I can go walk that same place for an hour after the season's over, and I can learn 10 times more in an hour walk than I can learn hunting the place all year.
Sure.
I think a lot of that's just because I've walked so many places, and like today, I think I got 10 or 11 antlers. I think last night I told you on the phone I got like 70, so I got like 80 antlers already this year. I can go out and what's that?
So when you're going out and you're finding antlers, because you mentioned this last night too when we were talking, is that there's certain patterns that you see. You know, you're walking these transition edges, and then you mentioned last night that you picked up an antler, one half of an antler, and you're like, you know, I look up on that ridge, and I bet that there's bedding up there, and I bet I can go find the other antler. So how do you, I guess, as you're walking these properties and picking up antlers or seeing certain sign, how are you putting those pieces together to kind of transform into your hunt?
So a lot of that is going to be experience at that particular property, but that's probably 50% of it. The other 50% of it is translating what I've learned elsewhere into that specific property, right?
Okay.
So I got places that I'll walk, like you just said, and like I like to burn a lot of cover crop fields, like rye and wheat fields, just because it's non-invasive, it's really not intrusive. I'm walking out in these fields. I usually do my first pass, like if you got a huge wheat or rye field, I'll walk about 40 yards off the edge. I'm all right with burning by, you know, a lot of 60, 70, 80-inch deer, burning by those antlers. But I'm looking for a big antler usually, so I'm just going, I'm huffing it, and I'm moving at like a jog or a slow walk. I mean, a slow jog or a fast walk.
Right.
And deer gravitate towards the edges, you know that, whether it be the edges of where pines meet hardwoods or, you know, even sweet gum out here meets oaks, or oaks meet poplar, or anything, any type of edge. You know, where a secondary succession field meets an ag field, any type of edge the deer gravitate towards. So I find most of my antlers within 20 or 30 yards of that edge. But in those big fields, I can walk 30, 40 yards away from the edge, and I could see the antlers all the way to the edge, and then I could see antlers out in the field also. So I'm covering the ground where they're most likely to drop when I'm burning fields, as well as doing a lot of head checking and glassing over into other fields. Like I can tell you last week, what was it? It was like last Tuesday, so 6 days ago, I was driving home, and I took another route home because I used to live down south of me a little bit, and there's a road that shoots kind of all the way across the county, and it goes through a big piece of parkland. But the speed limits on this road is like 55, 60 miles an hour. And I looked out on my window, and I saw a little glimmer out in the field. It wasn't even a glimmer. It was a speck, but there was two specks together. Whenever I see two specks together, I know it's a set. I know, you get fooled by one all the time, but whenever there's two together, you just know. And I ended up pulling over, and I did the hustle out there and grabbed them, and I, told all my buddies, like, hey, don't worry about this spot. I just found the biggest set out there from the car. So I can tell you, man, like, I'm always looking, and when
Your
I'm
eye is pretty trained to see them, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I get, dude, I spent so much time walking, man. I can't tell you. And like we talked about last night, I get two things. I either go walking or I go out shed hunt. A lot of times, I'll go out just to walk. And when I'm walking, I'm not, the eyes are always on the ground to a certain extent, but even when I'm shed hunting, my eyes are always up too. When I go out for a walk, I'm looking for, I think we talked about this last night. Two biggest determinants into what I'm looking for when I take a walk. Number one is, or what I'm looking for in a hunting property, first off, is low deer densities, and two is security cover.
Uh-huh.
So low deer densities are the first priority typically around here because so many places, even in the agricultural areas of Maryland, are so overpopulated with deer that the deer, outside of those times of the year when agricultural access provides them with a resource to eat, there's no cover left in the woods or anywhere else for these deer to eat. So they're going to have some stunting. They're going to have some issues with their nutrition. And, people talk about it all the time. It's genetics, maturity, and nutrition is what creates the biggest and best bucks.
Right.
When you take out any one of those three things, you're going to have issues and they're not reaching their full potential. So I look for areas with lower deer densities. And typically what comes along with these lower deer densities, too, is a lack of hunting pressure. Because around here, there's so many places available, even on public lands. I won't tell you which, because I don't want people running all over them. But there's a lot of public land around here that you can show up, and you can shoot a deer within an hour in a tree. You know what I mean? There's plenty of deer. So I look for those lower deer density spots because a lot of times, people go out 1, 2, 3 times and they don't see but a couple deer or any deer at all. Then they're going to leave. And they're not going to come back. And they're going to run it off. So
that's one advantage of having some of those higher deer density spots because sort of the passerby hunter, the guy that's not really looking to hunt specific animals, if he gets into one of those areas, he or she gets into one of those areas, they're going to be perfectly happy with seeing, a lot of deer, and maybe not the biggest deer, but they'll be seeing a lot.
Oh, yeah. So I'm looking for that when I take a walk or if I look at a hunting property. And, I can tell you, I told you last night, too, that my properties that I have now, I only have 2 properties where I actually went out and found these properties myself, obtained permission, and started hunting them. The other 4, 5, 6 properties that I hunt are all through that developer.
Okay.
So these are all areas that I got what I got. I'm going to make the best out of what I got. So the last 4 big bucks I killed, between 2010 and now, I've killed 4 deer over 160, two of which, the 2 biggest, coincidentally, were both off of properties that I went out and obtained permission to hunt, and I can still hunt at these 2 properties. The other 2 were at properties that I got from this developer. That, he was, hey, Luke, I got this new property, go check it out. And it was like, hey, I got what I got. I'm going to go check these places out and try to make the best out of them that I can,
Right.
So
when you go ahead.
You know what, now that I think of it, those 2, I tell you when I go out for a hunting property, I look for low deer densities. The 2 that I'm talking about now, where I killed those deer, are overrun with deer. Bad. I mean, I'm having issues there with quality for sure. Because in just these 3 or 4 years, the deer populations there have exploded because of fragmentation of woodlots and a lot of development.
Sure, that makes sense.
So
when you find one of these areas where you have the low deer density, you found some security, some places where they're secure and they could hold up, how do you then go about breaking that property down further to where you're going to do your actual setup?
So, 9 times out of 10, I find that place. 9 times out of 10, I'll look at a map, and it'll be like Bing maps.
Sure.
They're bird's eye view, and I can be like, that's where I want to hunt. I look at topo maps I look at topo maps just for what they're actually made for. I want to know before I walk into a property what this place looks like, the way it lays. If a property's terrain features are great, or if it's steep and nasty and rugged, you can make 20 acres look like 80 acres pretty quick, But I want to know what a place looks like before I walk into it. So I look at that topo map for that reason, just that I want to look at it. To see what a place looks like. Along with that bird's eye view, I can get a really good mental image of exactly what that place looks like before I go into it.
Sure.
But for finding the property, man, it comes down to 2 things usually. It's security and food. So deer are slaves to their stomach, man. They got to eat. Every deer's got to eat, and that's pretty much, that and security are their priorities throughout the year. And the security piece of it is extremely helpful because, I don't really care what a deer does all night. I don't care what it's doing. I just do night pictures with trail cameras. It's like, oh, it's great and all, but it's not really helping me. I can't shoot a deer at night. I want to know where that deer's laying down, not like a specific bed like most of the beast guys do. I just need to know the general area or the bedding area or it's usually a point or a ridge or a flat or something like that I want to find or I want to know of and to use that to my advantage because typically the places closest to that point are the places that he'll most readily utilize in daylight when I can shoot him. So, and that's dependent on the time of the year. Like during the fall, I find a lot of times that if we have a good acorn crop around here, particularly with white oaks, we usually have some type of storm blow through, like I told you before, like a hurricane or a tropical storm. It'll knock all the whites off the trees. So if that happens, it's usually in mid-September to late September, even early October. My deer lay down, a lot of deer, not all of them, a lot of my deer lay down, stand up, start eating, eat all night, or, through the late afternoons and the evenings, through the night, lay down in the morning, and do the same thing the next day. You can't shoot a deer like that, man. I don't care who you are. If that deer is not moving, and he's just standing up and eating and laying exactly where he eats all day, you're going to have issues.
Right.
So that's what I think a lot of people around here, particularly accredit that October lull to, is those deer just standing up and eating right where they're living, So that's tough. Until he gets a sniff of something he likes, some female version of that, then he's not going to be moving much, and he's going to hang out in those places. You want to make a move in on him, great. You may bump him, and even if you don't bump him, you're probably not going to get close enough, and he may just eat and turn his head the wrong way and take a couple steps the wrong way, and you're never going to get close enough to him, So I find that a lot, and that's, that kind of ties into when I do my scouting trips. Throughout the year, I look for days of chaos, man. If it's blowing like crazy or if it's raining like crazy, I get out there and I start huffing it. And I can get a pretty good walk in those days. I always move slow. I mean, during the outside of the season, I burn, man. I'm a big dude. I'm like 6'5", and I hustle for sure. You know what I mean? And when I'm in the woods, if I'm shed hunting or scouting outside of the season, I hustle. I know where I want to go. I know what I want to look at. And if I'm not there, then I'm going to just keep huffing it until I get there,
Right.
So, but during the season, I move slow, even in those chaos environments, because I don't want to kick any deer up. Even if it's, raining at a half an inch an hour and blowing at 25 miles an hour. I don't care. I don't want to kick these deer up. I don't want deer to know that I'm where they want to be during daylight hours, you know? So,
that was an interesting point that you make, that you're not afraid to go into some of these areas during the season prior to you having hunted them if you access them during those chaos times when you're using weather and other disruptions where deer typically are going to be held up, bedded down, not be, as alert, and you're going to, you can get in undetected.
Yep. So that's huge. Like, I think I told you, man, I said 84% of my time is spent thinking, 15% of my time is spent scouting, and the 1% is spent actually hunting.
Right.
Because even when you're hunting, you're scouting and you're thinking. Even when you're scouting, you're thinking, but you're not hunting. Even when and you can think about it all the time, So, I'm always, everybody's always got that part of their brain that's thinking about hunting. Like, you sit there, you ask any one of us during November, hey, what would you rather be doing? Every single one of us would answer hunting. God, we love our families. It's great. We like hanging out with our friends and drinking beer on the weekends. It's great, too. But we'd rather go to bed early and wake up and pull it all day.
Right.
Sometime between November 1st and November 20th. Any of us would. So, you can always think about ways to get it done and go after the deer you want to shoot. Or, I've had plenty of times where I'm like, I'll just be sitting there, be doing something in normal, everyday routine. That's why that deer did that, or that's why that deer was there. That's why that deer came from this direction. So I'll refer back to one such instance was this year. So I got that deer that I shot this year. I'll probably revert back to him a couple times over the course of this conversation just because it's still fresh in my mind. But This year, I was checking cameras. I check cameras pretty consistently. If there's something on my cameras, I want to know about it right away. I see a lot of guys say, oh, yeah, I put my cameras out in August and I check them in January. That's great. You may have had 3 200-inch deer on your camera, and they could have came for a week straight in daylight, and you wouldn't have known about it till January. That's really helpful. That's no good, man. You gotta. I go out every opportunity I can. I check cameras.
And that's where you're using. Yep, and that's where you're using that hard rain or storm fronts moving in or something.
Yeah, if those opportunities arise, then absolutely. If that happens, I'm going. You know what I mean? Even if it's 2-3 days apart, it's a perfect excuse to go. If deer want to smell you, they're going to smell you. It's like your dog. You let him out your back door, and you go run somewhere in the backyard, or you hide in your woods. He's going to find you in 2 seconds. Imagine if that dog thought that you were out there to kill him. He would definitely find you, and he'd probably find you faster. And that's what deer do. So even though there's that scent, they're still going to pick you up. They're going to smell you, no matter what. But even though that's there, it's there. It's less. It's obviously not as strong. It's a little more tainted. You've all seen deer during a rainy day walking during November. They're looking for a deer a lot more so than they are. They're having issues when they're trying to bird dog. They try to bird dog a doe a couple minutes behind a doe when it's raining. They're going to have some issues. It's going to take them a lot longer than when it's bone dry. It hasn't rained for 4 or 5 days, and he's on a fresh track 5 minutes after she came through.
Right.
So those days that I go out with that chaos environment, that's more to hide and conceal myself and my own movements more so than it's my scent.
Sure.
I wear rubber boots that I keep in the back of my truck. I don't spray down. I don't do any of that stuff. I get out of the car. I rip my feet through the mud and the leaves and everything else. It's about within the first 50, 100 yards of my car before I go check a camera. And I find some wet leaves, and I just kick my feet all around through them and just kind of burn off as much of that cover scent as I can, that human cover scent from the back of the car, back of the truck. Like that, I keep them in the cab of my truck. And even if they're wet, I'll throw on, keep a couple grocery bags, like Safeway bags in there. I'll put those over the top of my socks, and I'll throw my socks in these rubber boots, and I'll go hike it down and check these cameras. And I do that through the course of the year. Yeah, my feet get wet. Yeah, it sucks, but I'm a paranoid schizo when it comes to deer scent and that type of stuff. I don't do the whole cover scent. I don't do all that. I don't do the any scents or decoys or anything like that. I want deer to just not even know I exist when I hunt. I just want to hunt their natural patterns and kill them and doing something natural. The more things you try to, sway into your favor and the more factors you try to control, I think the more mistakes you can possibly make. So that's why I don't do any of that stuff. But so with my cameras, I hang them high because I was sick of getting all those in-your-face shots when I hung them need a waist high of a deer getting a sniff from my camera, a big one, and then just never seen them again. So I'm a big dude, like I mentioned before. I put my cameras 8 feet up, and I angle them downward, and I feel like that's a 50% rule, man. I get 50% more pictures doing that than I would otherwise. So I don't know where do we start with that? Where was this?
We started with your buck from this year, so you were going to start explaining how you. Yep.
So yeah, when you're thinking, you're always thinking, right? So I had an issue this year, man. I kept getting this deer. I knew where he was coming from. I knew where he was bedding, and I knew which side of my property he accessed. When he was coming off of his bed.
Sure.
In the afternoons and coming in there. I don't even think I hunted one morning this entire year. That's something we didn't talk about yesterday. But
no, we didn't.
You, man, I didn't hunt a single morning, man.
Now, do you typically hunt mornings or no?
Man, I don't like going into the woods in the dark and kicking deer around, man. I run into things. I hit branches and stuff. I feel like every time you do that, you're getting some scent on. I
think it's definitely a different.
What's that?
I think it's definitely something that it's a learned, because I used to hunt a lot of mornings before I started learning how to do things differently, and that was the exact thing I ran into. The properties that I hunted in the morning,
man. Yeah,
I would bump deer a lot.
Yeah, you can't control. I can control more variables in the afternoon than I can in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Without a doubt. I can't tell you how many pictures, man. I mean, hundreds of daylight pictures of this deer in the first 45 minutes of shooting light, and dude, I didn't get, I got a couple during the rut. I got them in between 11 and noon this year, a couple times, and then I think I got them once on the 23rd of November, and then I didn't get him again on daylight until December 25th or something this year. And I was getting him in the mornings all the time. So I knew he was bedding close, and I knew where he was bedding, but he just wouldn't come off his bed till later. And I didn't want to go in there because I knew he was somewhere in this red oak flat that I was hunting. There's no deer in there, so the red oaks dropped really heavy the second week of November, and this deer stayed on them, and they're still on them. I walked in there the other day just checking it out, getting a pretty good feel of what was going on in and around that property. And those deer are still on the red oaks, just like he was when he came in and I shot him in the bachelor group that he was on too. So I just feel like, mornings they're great at some times of the year in some parts of the country, I'm sure. But where I hunt and the way that I hunt, I would be second guessing myself too much, and it would just drive me nuts. So
what allows you,
especially if I'm on a big one, I'd be like, oh man, I blew him out of here this morning. I bet I did. And then if I checked my camera and I found that he was on there, somewhat near that time of when I went in there, and I knew that I blew deer out, I'd be eating myself alive.
So with that specific property you talked about, what sort of determined where your stand placement was, is that there was some bordering property where you had sort of like the backyard hunters that were creating some external pressure.
Yeah, so there, that whole piece of what I was getting into. Sorry, I start getting into things, and then I just go completely off somewhere else. So what was happening there, I kept getting this deer. I knew he was coming, so the way my camera was facing was directly to the north. I knew this deer was moving out of the east and heading west. So every time he approached his camera, it was coming out of the left frame of the camera, and he was approaching with his right side of his face closest to the camera. So he was moving east to west, and the camera was facing from the south to the north.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, I started getting straight-on shots. Like the first pictures he would give me in the late evenings or the afternoon would be straight on. And I was like, what is going on, man? I was like, this deer is walking way up the hill.
So he was coming from the north then?
Yeah, he was coming from the north. And so the way this property was situated, it's like a road with a couple houses on it, scattered houses on it. You know, it's kind of out there a bit, this road is, but everything below the road is woods and huntable ground, and the whole property is really steep downhill, and it runs down to this big, it's not a river, but I'll call it a river because you guys would think it was a river. It's big. You know what I mean? It's tough for a deer to cross. It's deep. It's wide. It's big water. So this whole property from the road all the way down to the bottom of the property is just sloping pretty steep downhill. So these neighborhood hunters, dudes coming in from these houses, were just kind of speckled along this hillside between the road and that river bottom. So these deer were working the bottom, like along the river. There was probably, anywhere between 50 to 150 yards flat down there that it was real swampy, low-lying, thick, nasty stuff. And where no hunting pressure down there. You know what I mean?
Do you find in general, because you have a lot of waterways in the places where you hunt, that those deer like to use those river edges or waterway edges as travel corridors?
It depends, man. That's property to property, but definitely, I can tell you I've killed a lot of deer off of that. You know what I mean? A lot of deer doing the same thing, particularly in the late season. I find that those deer start gravitating towards those areas a lot more. Gun pressure around here, man. Once the guns go off, these deer, you got to flip the script, man. Do you think
too that probably might have something to do with the browse that's available? Obviously,
resources available, absolutely. So, that temperature of that ground fluctuates a lot more so than the other hillsides, just because it's wet. And so when the green up comes, like I do a lot of my shed hunting down in those bottoms where it's wet. Everything's wet around here, but those bottoms are a lot more so. I do a lot of my shed hunting down there because you get a green up earlier and you get a lot more browse and you get some food down there early for them. And if deer are dropping in, like we had a couple warm days, I swear you can already see the green coming through. And a lot of our deer haven't dropped yet. So I know this year in particular, because it's going to be warm at the end of this week, my deer are going to be dropping down in those places. And I like walking them because nobody else walks them too. So, so those deer were hanging out down there. And where they were accessing my property was the bottom side of this property. There was a bunch of red oaks down there, and they dropped, like I told you, in like the second week of November during the rut. And so those deer were, that place was goofy up until about gun season, probably November 25th or so, because those bucks, I had 3 does on camera at this property between October 15th and when I pulled my camera out of there like last week. 3 does. There's for around here, I got places that I would see 30 does a night on some of my cameras. There's just not a lot of deer there. So that's what kept those reds down. And I had a batcher group. All my bucks that I saw through the course of the year I ended up batchering off in December 20th or so. So
this is kind of the exact makeup that you talked about earlier. Lower deer densities allowed those red oaks, the acorns that dropped, didn't get over-browsed. That food was available later into the year. Yep,
and that's part of the reason why I look for. You can find a food source so much easier when the deer can't wipe it out as fast. You know what I mean? So if there were more deer in there, if I was seeing 20 does in there, those red oaks would have been decimated, and they would have moved on to the next food source, then the next, and the next, and the next. Like I told you, man, 2 things. I'm looking for food and security. So deer slaves to their stomachs. They're going to keep coming back there because they're going to want that high caloric content, that high fat, high protein, high carbohydrate content that acorns have to offer. And as long as they're available, they're going to keep hitting them and hitting them and hitting them. And that's what they were doing here. So that helped me for sure, man. I knew where my deer were coming to eat, And what was happening was this deer, I was getting these head-on shots of him, and I was like, this deer's screwing up, man. Why is he coming uphill, all the way up this hill, walking through all this hunting pressure before he gets to me, and then coming straight downhill and checking out my camera? And I was thinking that he was cutting my track. I was thinking he was coming up the hill because he figured out, hey, this dude's doing something down here, playing with something, and then walking out of here in the middle of the day every now and then. I'm going to figure out what he's doing. But in reality, what I found out he was doing later on, when I moved some cameras around, was he was following that swamp bottom past my property. Then he was coming uphill on the opposite side of the property and then coming down the hill without cutting my track.
Right.
You know what I mean? So he was doing a loop around me instead of cutting way up above me and coming straight down on me. So
he was avoiding your access trail completely instead of
which is great for me, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
It was like towards the end of the year, I started getting that deer on camera, like right around December 22nd, 3rd, 4th, or 5th, something right in there. About 8 days before I killed him, he started showing up in daylight. And dude, I wait for this every year because I've done this so many times, and I swear by this too. It's just kind of the same thing I swear by, that a deer getting stunted within a changed environment when you mess with their core range and you alter, manipulate their core range, is when these deer batch are up in late season. If you have the opportunity or you get lucky enough to come across a batcher group, typically they're made up of a pretty diverse age structure of deer, of bucks, and what happens is these 1.5 and 2.5-year-old deer get antsy about a half an hour before last light, and they'll get up and start moving. The bigger, just like you witness a lot of times in the summers, in those big batcher groups out in bean fields or wherever else, when they get up and start moving, it drags the big boys out too, man. And so this has been, I think that's the 4th year in like 7 or 8 years that I've killed between like the 24th or like the 23rd and the 1st of January. 23rd of December and like the 1st of January, that week period is once the deer are batchered up, they have an identified food source. The first thing that deer is going to do when it gets up, that 1.5 or 2.5-year-old deer, is immediately go to that identified food source. Everybody knows that deer, particularly bucks, during that time of the year are all about food because they beat the hell out of themselves during the rut.
Yep.
So, and that includes the 1.5 and 2.5-year-olds. So they get up and go crush this food source, and they walk the big boys into their death. So what happened that night was I was still on these red oaks, and the deer were still all in these red oaks. It was a pretty big flat, and I was on the far bottom side of this flat. And it was almost like an old logging road or like path. It looked like an old road. Came up out of that swamp bottom into the bottom side of this flat. So the wind was blowing out of the west, like straight out of the west, so east to west, and these deer were coming straight out of my east. They angled below me on that swamp bottom, and once they got around my bottom side and started, they started actually working their way off to my south. Once that happened, I was like, oh, they're done. You know what I mean? So the first 3 that came in were the smaller bucks. It was like a 1.5-year-old deer, 2.5-year-old, and a 3.5-year-old. Right in that order, all within 15, 20 yards of each other. And once they did it, I was like, all right, we're good. And I'm looking, I'm scanning, and you can't see too far. I'm like, where are the other ones? Where are the other ones? Where are the other ones? Because I knew from my cameras that it was like bing, 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 bing.
Right,
all come in a row. And they all go off, and I looked up, and the 3 big boys were there, and that big one was in that group. And they followed suit right behind the other ones, man. And those little ones, that's what I think happens. They all bed together or close to each other, and the big ones see, oh, there's my boys. They're up and moving. Let's go. That means it's time to rock. And they came right up into those red oaks. They stuffed their faces. They started going to war. You know what I mean? They started scratching, sniffing for them. And the big ones came in, and I shot them. So, and that hasn't happened just once. I mean, a lot of that translates to my scouting and walking in late season for sure. I think that has to be a part of it, man, as to how and why I shot, 4 of these really solid bucks for around here at least in late season during that time frame, is because I walk a lot come February, and deer are typically on just about the same patterns than they are then.
Yeah, and that's what's actually interesting me about that story or that chain of events, because you're tying together sort of the deer's basic needs. I mean, they've got a secure point in that river bottom, that swamp bottom, where they're all bedding together. There's this awesome food source that they've located and that they can get to securely. Well, they thought they could get to securely to feed. But since the time of the year that it is, they've worn themselves down. A lot of that random travel that might have happened during the rut, where they were broken out of patterns, they're now, a slave almost to that food source because they're trying to build themselves back up. And, like you said, with population densities being higher in these other surrounding areas, they might have to compete even harder for a food source like this. So,
without a question.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that's how it really ties together to find, in your situation, to find those lower deer density areas where there is a good food source and secure cover, because it's like the perfect combination for getting those more mature animals to slide in and feel safe.
Yeah, like I alluded to earlier, another huge piece of that is that the pattern doesn't change nearly as much or as quickly when that food source isn't diminished as quickly. You know what I mean? So if that food source takes a month to diminish, then that's, in contrast to in a high deer density area, that food source could diminish completely in a week. That gives you an extra 3 weeks to pattern these deer and get on these deer before you see that pattern change or that transition.
Right.
So that's a huge piece of it for me too, man. And I didn't even really pick up on that until this year, because I never hunted a deer on a consistent food source like that late season. Not to that extent. Where I was hunting these deer a lot, and where I killed a lot of these deer late season before, was just on green stuff, man. Like around here, it's honeysuckle, greenbrier, and grapevine. Mm-hmm. So those are late season. You can find a big thicket with that. The bedding area becomes the food source, So just kind of like in October, like I told you about before, except, the biggest exception to that is these deer are standing underneath of one huge white oak tree and living underneath one huge white oak tree for weeks on end. Whereas, in the winter, I find a lot more times than not that they've batchered up, and those little ones move a little bit more, and they bounce around a little bit more, and the big ones follow them. They just follow them right into their death. So I've had that 4 times, man. So the first time I did that, I had a deer. This will move me into my next point, man. So, it used to be, like, these cameras now tell me that. Like, cameras are like, all right, these deer are up on their feet in daylight. It used to be that my cameras, I was my own camera. So I would go out and be like, just like anybody else, you were hunting somewhere, and you'd see or observe something somewhere else.
Right.
As in, while you're in the tree, I would see a deer or a buck. This used to happen all the time. It doesn't happen as much now, and it's because of my cameras. But I would be hunting, and I would see 70 or 80 yards out a buck do something. The next day, if the conditions were the same and everything was right, I would move in on that pattern or on what I observed the day before.
And by conditions, you're talking like weather, wind.
Yeah. Yep. Right. So I got to mention this, man. I'll never ever hunt, even if everything's perfect, but my wind's wrong. The only thing that I stay true to, man, is I hunt the wind. Mm-hmm. I will never hunt a wrong wind. I won't even think about it. You know what I mean? I'll completely write it off. And another thing to mention too, which is terrible, and I hate that I do this, is I have my cameras. So if a lot of times, the whole reason why those deer were probably manipulating and utilizing that food source on those red oaks, I didn't hunt, man. If I wasn't getting the daylight ping like I wanted, and something wasn't telling me, hey, it's time to go in there, I wouldn't go. I just don't. I just know myself, man. I lay off. I'm like, just wait. And I wait for that perfect opportunity, and once it's there, I go out and hunt. And that's when I'll start really, really gearing up. And this year was the first year since 2012 that I geared up at all. I mean, I could tell you I didn't hunt much at all. Since 2012, I shot, my biggest buck. And then 2013 and 2014, I just didn't have a big buck to hunt, I was getting a ton of big bucks. It was like that 37 mature buck spread. It was a bunch of them. The biggest thing I had come by was like a 140 or 145, and I didn't want to shoot it. So,
but it seems to me, I mean, even though you're using cameras a lot, though, because you've done these observations over the course of the last several years, and you understand the layout, the food sources, the security of the particular piece of property,
Yep.
You can sit back and say, okay,
Yeah.
it's this time of the year, it's these conditions, now it's time to slide in.
Yep, and that was a huge part of it too, man. If people were like, oh, he just showed up. The places that I hunted and the places, I mean, outside of where I hunted this year was the first year that I really, really started hunting that place where I shot that buck.
Mm-hmm.
I had some negative experiences there in years past, and I witnessed a ton of hunting pressure there. And I didn't know going into this year that there were that many people hunting either, but once I got that buck on camera, I didn't really care. So, but, I never had deer just show up. It wasn't like, oh, this deer just showed up. And it was like, no, man, it was, like that deer I shot, the biggest deer I ever shot in 2012. I watched that deer from the time he was 1.5 years old to the time that he was 5.5. I mean, I had a pile of antlers off of him. That I was literally picking up as they fell off his head. And it was like, I didn't have deer just show up. I was putting in a lot of work and a lot of time figuring my deer herd out wherever I hunted. And I never believed in, I go sit in the woods and see what shows up, because it just didn't happen. It didn't happen on cameras. It didn't happen whenever I sat in the woods. It just never really happened. Like I told you before, man, every one of these big deer I've ever shot, I knew I was going into that specific spot. Starting with the first buck, like where we started at the beginning of this conversation, I was hunting for that buck. I went out in the woods, I sat in the woods, and waited for that buck to come by, and I killed him. But it never happened that easily. Like, there were plenty of times where, probably 10-1, just like anybody else, where you would go out, you'd witness something, you'd see something, you'd see one move by at 80 yards on the opposite side of the ridge. You'd go over there and sit on the opposite side of the ridge the next day, and he'd never come by. And you never got a shot at him. You never had him killing that deer.
Right.
But, it just so happened that just about all the deer I did shoot was when I did make that move, and it did happen. But you don't see the other 10 times to 1 where I would do it, and it didn't work. So, I mean, that's a part of it too, man. And as I get older, the more and more I learn. But it's just you're never going to stop learning, man. If we were all perfect hunters, we're not. Every time we went out, we would shoot a 200-inch deer. If I was the perfect hunter, I would go out on opening day of this year, and I'd shoot the state record. But we're not. That's what makes hunting awesome.
Well, and that's somewhat, to me,
you fail 99% of the time you try.
Right, right. Well, that's somewhat challenging about heading out into new places. Like, not only hunting aside, but going and exploring those new areas and scouting. Because
you don't know.
You don't know.
That unknown. Yep.
Yep, and you're trying to figure it out, and then maybe you put this plan together and figure certain things out about the way the land lays out, and you compare it to other places you hunted, and then you do that first sit, and like you said, or maybe you get certain things on camera, and all of a sudden the pieces start coming together. And that is the exciting part about it.
Yeah. So that's what basically that's what happened with me at that other property this year. It was like, what, I've had access to this place, and I think the last time I was in there and hunted was like 2012 or 2013, and it was a mess. Like, I remember walking it before I even hunted it, and there were just stands all over the edge of the properties, feeders and everything. It was a mess. I was like, I don't want to deal with this, man. I was like, I'm just writing this place off. So, like, October 15th this year, I just don't have anything really big anywhere. And I was like, this place is probably the least likely spot of everywhere I got for one to show up. I was like, there's a lot of good, it had great terrain, and it was a big clear cut to the east of this place, like way out where I thought these deer were bedding for most of the year. I was like, I'm going to put a camera in here on October 15th, and I'm going to run it in here till they open into egg hunt season. So I was like, I'm just going to run one camera over top of that main trail, right where those deer were coming up out of that swamp bottom and accessing my property too. And that access point was also for like the whole property, it seemed like. They would come up out of that bottom and work their way up to the northeast corner of the property, was loaded with whites early on in the year. And that's where it seemed like most of the deer were filtering to, even through the rut. Because, like I said, those low deer density numbers, that even those whites stayed available up until, a lot of times they suck them down as they drop. But in this instance, because of low deer density numbers, they lasted. So these deer had acorns from mid-September, and they're still eating them, So I put that camera in there October 15th, and that deer showed up in like October 30th in the late afternoon. And then he showed up on the 31st of October in the middle of the day at like 11:30 a.m. So I'll revert to that too, man. My thing is, a lot of guys are like, oh, November. I'm an October guy, man. I'm a late October guy. October 27th to like the 30. My like 8 magic days would be like October 27th to like November 4th. Those days for me, man, are like, that's it. Once those does are in heat, it's So,
for me, the last 2 years I've shot, the 2 biggest bucks of my life have been in October, the 25th and the 30th. And
I like late October, man. And this year I actually, I'll say this story because it happens to all of us, man. It was the first buck I really feel like I screwed up on. I had this deer, man. He's 8 years old. I've been watching him at this property since 2011. And he was in like 2012 and 2013. He was nice, man. He was like 150, 155-inch stem point. Real thick antlered deer. He's big body deer. He's the biggest body deer in this place. And I've had all kinds of deer moving in and out of here through the years. But October 20, like, it was a Thursday afternoon. It was a Friday afternoon. I don't know if it was, I don't know the exact date. I think it was like October 24th. I don't know why that date's resonating in my head. But he came in, and I was pumped because I hadn't seen him this year yet in the woods. And I was super pumped, and he came right by, and I was, I didn't want to shoot him. He's probably only 135, 140-inch deer, and he's like an 8-year-old deer. I get attached to deer kind of like pets. I don't know. And I got a couple antlers off of him, and I'm like, sweet. And I like that he's still alive. Every now and then you got to just let deer be deer and not shoot them all. Keeps us human. I don't know. So I let him go, and he got by me. And, dude, I don't know what happened, man. I felt this tickle of wind in my neck. And, like, as I felt it, I was like, damn. And I looked, and he snapped, man. I mean, he snapped to attention so fast. And I got this thing, man. I'm a pretty calm, patient dude when it comes to hunting. When I get busted, man, I always got to zap them. I just do, and it's only with does. It never translates to bucks, because I don't really think I get busted by bucks too much. But, dude, I freaked out. Like, I got so lit when this deer busted me, man. And I immediately drew back, and I had him at, like, 40. And, dude, I held, like, right, I wanted this, when they're, like, anywhere from, like, 33, 34 yards to, like, 43 yards, that range, I always hold right at the bottom of there where air meets hair is what I call it, right behind the shoulder where air meets hair, because they dip into the arrow. And, dude, I let this arrow go, man, and he didn't move. I mean, he held true as a statue, and the top blade of my mechanical opened up, and it opened him up like a zipper, just like a zipper. And, dude, he ran off, and he came in behind does. That's what I thought was crazy, man. 8-year-old buck was chasing does on the 24th, like dogging does. You know what I mean?
Oh. Yeah.
And, dude, as soon as I let the arrow go, I was like, what am I doing? Why did I shoot? You got to get it together. And I don't do that, man. I let a lot of deer walk by, and that was stupid of me. It was stupid. But he ended up running away, and I was like, oh, maybe he's dead, Maybe I ripped him open and he's just bleeding like crazy. I get down, there's blood. I'm like, get back up in the tree, man. I'm like, just give it a minute. Dude, I get it like, this is early. I was only in the tree for like 30 minutes maybe.
Sure.
30 minutes later, he comes running back by, man, chasing these does the opposite direction. So luckily, he lived through the whole year. He's absolutely fine. I had him on camera like every day. And the guys that lease the backside of that farm, they got a bunch of cover crop in. They got a bunch of wheat in that came in early. It looks really good. And they burned their fields up last week, and they got his match out there.
Nice.
So, like that kind of stuff, man, we do that stupid stuff. We all do, and you just gotta kind of take it in stride. But that was a blessing in disguise because, you know, I ended up, after that happened, it was like a week later that big one showed up on camera that I ended up shooting this year.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah,
you never
things
know,
like
man.
that happen for a reason.
Yeah.
Well, plus to say with that, too, I mean, I think being able to make a split-second decision like that can sometimes help you get a buck that you otherwise wouldn't get if you're hesitant or, you know, not confident in your shot.
If I ever even question it to any extent, I just don't do it. I just don't. You know? I don't know, man. I'm a shed dude. Like, I feel like every time I pick up a set of sheds, like, I shoot them, you know? And I'm like, I would rather shoot them like 3 times over and pick up their match like a couple years in a row. And then it gives me something to walk for. Like, some of my best bucks, I'm like, especially my big 4-year-old, that's what I get so pumped about. Like, if I can get a big 4-year-old, I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I don't have to shoot him this year. I just got to pray he makes it, and I can't wait to walk for him.
Right.
You know?
So you said a lot of the guys that you talk with hunting with and sort of have your exchange information with are all wildlife biologists, but a lot of them don't even hunt anymore. They just hunt sheds.
Yep, these guys, actually, like this weekend, man, same dudes I hung out with all weekend, walked with all weekend. So 2 of the guys are head biologists for their respective counties around here. Mm-hmm. And most of their responsibilities include conducting assessments which go in detail to find out exactly what the deer densities are for these places and trying to get these places down to their appropriate carrying capacities. So a lot of the numbers these guys throw out is like 40 to 50 deer per square mile, which is still pretty high, but that's what they want these places to be at. Right. And there's places, you know, they're all doing, most of their responsibilities come down to during, from like late November into early April is doing the shoots, the controlled hunts, the management shoots at night. And they do that during that time of the year so the meat doesn't spoil.
Right.
So, you know, these guys, man, they're really, 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 you know, they're really into it, man. They love it. They love this stuff. They love deer. They like all things deer. And they obviously, you know, that's their job. But,
do you think the number of sheds that you guys are able to pick up in these, you said, you know, some of the public access land and also the park land and then obviously the private land that you guys have access to, but do you think, I guess, the sheer number, I mean, obviously you guys are putting a lot of time on foot, but do you think that's contributed to the deer density in general? I mean, that's a lot of antlers you guys are picking up.
Yeah, I think that
or how many miles are you covering to get 70? You said you have 70 antlers
like a lot.
already.
A lot, man. It depends. I mean, there's days like I had one day this year with my best. Dude, I went out without a backpack. Mm-hmm. You know, I found this herd of deer. It was actually like right down the street of my office. It was on the backside of a property that I hunt. Actually, I'll get into this property later because I brought Andy from the site, Ridge Runner 7, out here.
Oh,
shot
sure.
a deer off that place. So the backside of this property was just, they put in some type of cover crop that had turnips in it, and it was like turnips, brassica, some type of brassica mixed with a rye and a wheat or something. Excuse me. And the deer were loaded into these fields, man. Somewhere between, probably like a realistic number was like 200 deer. Whoa. And they were accessing these out of this. You know, this is a big property, man. I mean, you know, it goes in at least a mile in every direction from there. And that just seemed to be where, you know, we got a big snowstorm. We had some really cold weather in January, and that's where that herd really centralized and herded up. So, you know, in 20 minutes, I ended up going out there without a backpack, and I got 20 antlers in like 55 minutes. I mean, sorry, I said 20 minutes before. It was like right under an hour. I got 20 antlers. So, I mean, that right there puts a big dent in it. Yeah. And then, you know, I think today, I don't know, I think I got like 10, 12 antlers or something like that today. And, you know, but then there's days like a couple of days ago, like Saturday, I burned all day, man. I didn't get a thing. Mm-hmm. You know, so the miles thing is so hard to figure out because I don't know. I mean, you know, like Saturday, I know I probably did closer to 20 than 15. I mean, I hustled, dude. I'm not going slow. Like I told you before, I'm almost jogging. If I got to get from one spot to another spot I want to go, I really hustle there. And, you know, at least half the time, once I get to that other spot, it isn't what I want to see, and I got to hustle to the next spot. So, you know, man, I mean, a lot of these places are public access ground. You're bumping into a lot of people on Saturdays and Sundays doing the same thing.
Doing the same
so that
thing.
kind of puts that extra little competitive drive into you.
Right. The faster you move, the quicker you're going to get to the virgin ground.
Especially with fields and stuff. Like, you gotta think, man, I don't know how long it takes people to run 4 or 5 miles. If they're at a pretty good pace, they're probably doing that in like a half an hour, you know, maybe 40 minutes. So I would figure in an hour, I'm usually doing probably 3 or 4 miles when I'm burning fields, and I do that very often. I got lucky enough to meet a buddy through, I've kind of known my whole life, but I got pretty cool with in high school, and he farms a lot of ground around here. And I got, you know, he gets access to a lot of properties, but only probably 3 to 5 of those properties are really worth checking out and looking into. And, you know, of those, probably half of them have enough cover crop in them planted through the year that the deer are really into them. So I'll burn those 3 or so properties, you know, 3 times a week, and then I'll check my other stuff, just fields and stuff, typically through the month, through February, because I don't want to really get in the woods and run these deer around and get all through their cover.
Sure.
Do all that stuff until I know they're down, because then you just create more problems for yourself. So, but, I mean, when I'm walking, man, I got a lot of this stuff, man, it's so hard to break down because there's so many things that go into it. A lot of this is just visual for me. Like, I'll walk into a place, just like I told you. Like, a lot of times I'll find an antler somewhere, and I'll be like, all right, because this antler is here and I know this about this property, the most logical place for this other side of this antler is going to be here. A lot of times I go there and it's there. Like, for whatever reason, deer like to look, wherever they're laying, a deer wants to look to where it will be that night. So I find this a lot. Like, a lot of times I'll be out in the field and I'll pick up a nice antler and I'll look and I'll be like, man, look at that ridge right there. That deer can look right here to this spot from that ridge if you wanted to. And I'll be like, you know, deer are all into security, man. They all are, especially the bigger, older deer.
But that's a good point, though. I mean,
by doing stupid things.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. You know, you find an antler there. It's exciting to find that antler, but then think about why it's there. What topography is around it.
Yeah, that's the best hard evidence you can get on a big buck, man. I'm telling you. So that where I shot my biggest buck, I got all 4 of his antlers within, like, from him being 3 years old and 4 years old, both of those sets. So when he was 3, he dropped his antlers about 50 yards apart from each other. And when he was 4, he dropped them about 10 yards apart from each other. And if you would have drawn a line between where he dropped his 2 from the 50-yard line, you know what I mean, between the first and the second when he was 3, smack dab in the middle of them, if you can make a 10-yard section within that 50-yard section is where he dropped them when he was 4. So, I mean, you know, and that's the biggest buck I've shot. That deer was like a freaking book, man. I mean, he did the same thing year in and year out.
Over and over.
From the time he was 1.5 years to the time he was 5.5. But then you got deer like, I mean, you know, all deer are different, man. There's some deer that you just can't, they just don't. You know, they don't have a primary bed. A lot of, they probably do have a primary bed, but that primary bed could be used 1 out of 10 times. They could have 30 beds that they use, and they only use their favorite one out of those 10 times, you know? So, you got to really understand. Like, that's my thing, man, is when I was shooting my best deer and killing deer, back from, like, 2009 to 2012 was when I was, like, really after it. And I think coincidentally it was when I had the most time, for sure, and I always had a big deer to go after. And I guess those 2 things in conjunction with one another kind of really kicked me into overdrive. And, dude, I was killing those deer, like, based off of, it was not like 1, 2, 3, or 4 factors. It was like tons and tons of things. all combined together and blended together is kind of what resulted in me shooting those deer. But I think all those things blended together is kind of what enveloped the personality of that deer. You know what I mean? And who that deer was, what he liked to do, where there were just so many things I knew about all those deer. And if you want to shoot a big deer, man,
learn that heavy observation
oh, yeah.
of the animals that you're hunting and just understand their moving patterns and what they're doing and their environment.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah, like people make their hit lists or whatever, man. I don't do that. I don't do the whole thing. I don't name deer. I don't want to name anything that I gotta shoot. That's just not good for me. So I get one deer, and I'm like, I just want to shoot that one. I don't care about the other ones, you know? Mm-hmm. And it's like, I don't get a hit list. It's like, I mean, maybe it's because I don't have those resources available where it's like, I got several deer that are worth shooting. It's like, I get one, and I've only ever really had one in my entire hunting life. I was only ever really hunting one deer at any one given time. So, and if the conditions, the problem is, like people were asking about that 37 mature buck spread. I was like, well, what happens when you hunt there? I was like, dude, I don't really hunt these places. Like, I can hunt them, but I don't because that's not where the deer is that I want to go shoot. So if I'm going to go hunting, I'm going to go hunt where I know that deer is. You know, these other spots, it's like, great. Like, why am I going to go there if I know I don't want to shoot a deer there? You know? Unless I want to go shoot those. So, once you really start, like, if you want to go out and kill the biggest and best of whatever you got to offer, you got to dedicate yourself to only shoot one buck. I mean, you know, it isn't for everybody. But, you know, for me it is, and that's the way I like to do it. And, you know, everybody's different, man. I got probably 95% of my buddies that hunt with me. They don't care. They just want to go shoot something, you know. But when I go hunting, I want to hunt a deer that I know as much about as I can. Tell me, you know, that increases your odds, man. Yeah. And you know, that being said, I learn the most when I walk and by shed hunting. Sheds are the most concrete evidence you can find as to where a deer was and why he was there. So, at least for me, that helps me the most.
So as far as your equipment and your stuff you bring in, you said you hunt mobile most of the time, but
right.
You made an interesting point that you straight up like using a climber, and it's comfortable for you, and you know that's what you use most of the time.
Yep. So I can tell you all the deer I ever shot, other than the double drop I got in opening day of 2010. I shot out of a climber, and you know, I got that big one out of the wooden stand when I was a kid. My first year, and the only reason I shot that double drop out of a hang-on was because I had a couple hang-ons at that property, and the night before opening day when I went out glassing, he walked by one of my hang-ons, and the wind was right. Like, that night it was right on the 14th, and then the 15th, the night I hunted it was right. So that was the only reason I was like, oh man, this is easy. Like, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to get an SD, and I'm going to shoot. And he did the same thing he did the night before, and I shot him. So...
But I think the important thing
what's that?
Yeah, because when you were talking about that last night, too, you said, you know, I'm a bigger guy. I like the comfort of the climber.
Yeah.
I can get up the tree fast and quiet. And so for you, all those confidence factors are all built into it, so it works. And it's not broken, so why change it, right?
Yeah, so, I mean, you know, it screws me sometimes, man. I told you that last night, too. It kills me sometimes. I'm like, oh, that tree would be killer. And I'm like, you know, I never hang a set in it. I don't like the permanence of it. I don't like hunting the place more than once. I just don't. Right. I don't know why. You know, it's a personal preference thing, man, like so many things in life and hunting in particular. I just like... you know, I can jack up a tree, like 35 feet up a tree in like 45, 50 seconds, man. I mean, I'm up there, good to go in like no time at all. And then strapped in, ready to rock. I got a big climber. I can get way up there. You know, I can change the tree I'm in often. It's just, you know, it's part of my portfolio, man. It's the way I hunt, you know. And it's work, for sure. I like it. I like my climber that I use. I use a Summit Viper. And, you know, it's light. I can get in and out with it real easily. And I don't know, man. With those sticks and stuff, I've seen some guys do it really quick, really easy, but it takes longer. I don't care who you are. It's not going to take you 35, 40, less than a minute to get up a tree and get in there. But you get to hunt. No. You are a lot more versatile, particularly with your tree selection. But luckily for around here and the places that I've chosen to hunt, I can make it. I'm pretty versatile too.
Sure.
With the climber. So, but I hate saying it because Andy gave me a hang on, man. And I did use it a couple of times. Andy Ridge Runner gave me a hang on after he came out here and hunted with me a couple of times. And I do use it. I just haven't used it. I took it down out of a tree that it was in, like just a doe killing spot. And I pulled it. But man,
why don't you tell
everybody? What's that?
Yeah. What why don't you tell that little story of Ridge Runner coming down
cool.
the first time you guys met? Yeah.
So first off, I have to preface this story by saying I thought all you Midwest boys could drink, but after Andy came down here, I learned otherwise real quick. He couldn't hang, man. So Andy came down, the first year he came down, I think he drove all day. I think he left real early one morning from Michigan and came down here so he could hunt the afternoon. I didn't even meet this dude yet. I think it was probably on the hunting beach or something. He said something like, "Hey man, I like to have state trips. I know this is super creepy and weird, and I'm like that online stalker dude that I'm hitting on you, man. I want to come hang out, go hunt." I was like, "Yeah, whatever, come on down." Right. So I was in work, and I was like, "Dude, I can't get out." But I was like, "So here's I do have properties that still to this day are littered with hang-ons. I've put them out. It's good to have them if you want to go hop out and go hunt, and it's just, for that reason that it's buddies come down, or if my dad, brother, whatever else during gun season, that type thing, if they want to go out and just shoot deer, I'll throw them in hang-ons or whatever. So, right. And he was like, "All right, I like this spot. I want to hit this." I was like, "All right, man, go ahead." So he called me when he was getting in. I was like, "All right, I'm going out." I'm like, "Cool, man. I'll meet up with you. We'll meet. We'll hang out." He was going to stay in my house. And I was like, "Don't worry about meeting me. Don't feel awkward. Just go out there, go hunting." So I was in work, and literally met this dude yet, and he's hunting one of my spots. And he hits me up. And he's like, "Dude, I just shot one." I was like, "What?" And he was like, "Yeah, dude, I just shot one, a 9-point came in, and I just hammered it." And I was like, "Oh, man." So I literally met this dude at a dead deer. That's how I met him. Was he was hunting with me, and I walked up. Like, "Hey, nice to meet you, man." Sweet. So that trip was pretty good, man. The first time he came out, it was good. That night, he got one. I think that night, I can't remember if we drank or not. We killed a lot of brain cells. So that the next morning, I think we went again. I think I knew he shot a couple does when he was here. He had another good afternoon hunt where I think he saw a 125-ish 8-point. I think that, he shot the deer he shot was a nice 3-year-old 9-point. But, he saw a couple nice deer. He hunted a lot. And he that was right at the beginning of that population explosion. It was probably at the point where the habitat was just about to flip.
Sure.
Probably 3 or 4 years ago. And then, so he came back for, I think, 2 more years. One of the years, the last time he was here was the biggest buck I've seen since his last time back. I mean, the biggest buck I've seen in the last 3 or 4 years was I was seeing this big, 175 or 180 out in this park. And in a park, that a lot of these parks lease their ground to farmers to farm.
Right.
But it's still open for public access. And I went down there with him, and luckily enough, that thing was out in the field. We watched that one afternoon, and that was pretty cool. Then, he was saying the biggest deer he's ever seen was out in Iowa. It's 175, 180-inch deer. I was like, "Come on out to Maryland, man. I'll show you one of them." So, man, we had a good time. Towards the end of the trips, because, I got to know him a little bit better, we weren't really talking about hunting as much. And we were still hunting a lot. Don't get me wrong. I talked to Andy all the time on the phone. And we still talk about hunting all the time, but, you end up hanging out and having a good time, man. And,
sure.
One of these days when his life slows down and my life slows down. Hopefully in the next couple of years we're going to go out to the Midwest and do it like a public land trip, something where we can just hang out. You know what I mean? I'm not too concerned, neither is he, with shooting deer. I know he is, actually. He likes to shoot some deer. He shoots some deer. Yeah. So, but we'll go out and hang out. And but that's how I met Andy. So if you ever bring him hunting, make sure you meet him first, because he'll kill your deer before he meets you.
He'll go into your land and kill your deer first. That's good.
Yeah. So.
Well, good. Well, is there any other specific topics, tactics, or anything that you want to cover? I think or any other hunts in particular that stick out in your mind that you want to cover?
No, I think that's good, man. I mean, people got questions, they can ask them. I don't want to talk about myself anymore.
Yeah.
So it's all, I'd like to say, man, I'm not I hope people got that, I love to hunt. Obviously, it's cool, but my thing is really walking and shed hunting, man. That's like my thing now. It's what I really like to do. Deer is like a year-round hobby for me. I like to look at them. I like to learn about them. I like to pick up their antlers. I'm not huge into shooting deer. I let a lot of deer walk by me, but I'm pretty sure that there's a ton of guys in the site that are the same way. And,
I think there is. I think anyone that's pursued these animals for a while, especially, like I said, when I was a kid, it is a respect thing. I mean, I spent a lot of time, and as you did as a kid, just observing and being out and hiking a lot, and so you get, I don't know if it's getting older, you get softer or whatever, but it's, you have a different respect for these
just
animals.
Getting out there and doing it, like that's my, I don't know, man. I guess it's because I'm a spaz. Obviously, you can kind of pick up on my ADHD through this phone conversation out there. Hey, Luke, let's stay on the topic. Hey, let's not. All right, Mario, here we go. So, man, I guess walking is just how I get to express my deer needs more, and I get to, really get that exercise in. I like to check places out. And, like I said, man, I'd rather pick up and shoot a buck 3 times over when he's got 3 different sets of horns on his head, like I do if I get to pick up his antlers and shoot him and just hang him on my wall. So,
sure.
But I'm sure there's a ton of guys out there like that. I'd like to hopefully get out there sometime or another. I got buddies that have been out to Iowa and Kansas and Illinois, and they're just like, dude, you got to go. Everyone comes back, and it's like, dude, these are the guys that hunt with me on the same properties I hunt. A lot of those biologists included save up their vacation time and quit hunting so they can shed hunt, and they go out to these types of places, and they're like, dude, it's another world.
Right.
So I'd love to get out there one day and learn some more, so I wouldn't have to grind so hard and figure out how to shoot one of these deer out here. So
it would be.
Not that you guys have it easy. I know you don't have it easy. There's nothing easy about any of it.
No, but it's just fun to go into different areas. I mean,
for sure.
I've never hunted out, outside of Wisconsin either for whitetails, so it'd be fun to do. Yeah,
so maybe I'll come out to Sussex and you'll come out to Annapolis.
Yeah.
And we'll, maybe you can drink more than Andy too. I hope you can.
Maybe I can drink a few more.
So, anyways, man, hopefully year's coming. I'm still young, so are you, so we can get out and do that and see what everything else has to offer and learn a thing or two about deer in the process.
Well, good. Well, thanks again for doing this, and obviously if anyone out there has questions or comments, please go to thehuntingbeast.com and post your questions and comments, and Luke will get back to you, and I'm sure be excited to answer those questions. So,
cool. Have a good one, Mario. Thanks again,
right.
Man.
Thanks again. Talk to you later.
See ya.
Bye.
That concludes today's podcast episode. Please go to thehuntingbeast.com to post any discussions, questions, or comments regarding today's podcast episode.